Did you know that in the early 1980s, the Soviet economy was growing at an average annual rate of 3 to 4%? Quite impressive, isn't it? But what was the true picture behind these numbers? Let's delve into the strengths of the Soviet economy, which at first glance seemed quite robust. One of the major pillars of this economic strength was the high growth rates. In the early 80s, the Soviet Union, with Russia as a significant component, experienced an average annual growth rate of around 3 to 4%. This growth was largely fueled by hefty investments in heavy industry and the military-industrial complex, which kept the economic wheels turning. Another strength of the Soviet economy was the guarantee of full employment. In an era where job security is a luxury for many, the Soviet system ensured virtually no official unemployment. This meant that every citizen had a job, a source of income, a sense of purpose and a role to play in the grand economic machine. However, this often came with the hidden cost of underemployment and inefficiencies. But as they say, every silver lining has a cloud. Last but not least, the Soviet state provided a comprehensive social safety net. This included subsidized housing, healthcare and education, making life more affordable for its citizens. The government played a significant role in providing these services, ensuring that everyone, regardless of their economic status, had access to basic necessities. Now, let's add some numbers to this narrative. According to the World Bank, in 1990, Soviet GDP per capita was estimated to be around $6,000 adjusted for purchasing power parity. And when it comes to savings, an average Soviet household saved around 10% of its income as per the International Monetary Fund. This was a reflection of the lack of trust in the banking system and the limited availability of consumer goods. So, on the surface, it seems like the Soviet economy was doing pretty well. But once we dig a little deeper, a different picture begins to emerge. So we've discussed the strengths of the Soviet economy. But what about its weaknesses? And how did these contribute to the eventual collapse of the USSR? Well, a key weakness was centralized planning. This meant that the government dictated production targets and prices, causing all sorts of problems. For one, it led to shortages of consumer goods. There was also a lot of inefficiency in production. Imagine trying to run a business, but someone else miles away is calling all the shots. It's a recipe for miscommunication and mistakes. Another significant weak point was the technological lag. The Soviet Union was trailing behind Western countries in terms of technological innovation, particularly in the fields of information technology and consumer goods. This gap only widened as the digital age dawned, leaving the Soviet economy struggling to keep up. Agricultural inefficiency was also a major issue. Soviet agriculture was highly collectivized, meaning it was controlled by the state, and it was notoriously inefficient. This led to chronic food shortages, which further strained the economy and the people's trust in the system. Now let's talk numbers. The Soviet Union devoted a staggering 15% of its GDP to military spending. This is a much higher share than most Western countries and shows where a lot of the economic focus was. On the other hand, the average Soviet household saved around 10% of its income. This reflects a lack of trust in the banking system and the limited availability of consumer goods. So, if we take a step back and look at the big picture, we see a mixed bag. On one hand, there were high growth rates and full employment. On the other, there were inefficiencies, a technological lag, and shortages of consumer goods. In essence, the Russian economy before the collapse of the USSR was a story of contrasts. Despite high growth rates and full employment, it was plagued by inefficiencies and shortages. These challenges, coupled with political and social unrest, ultimately led to the demise of the Soviet Union, a fascinating tale of economic highs and lows.